Hi everyone, it's your host Bella here. I wanted to take some time at the start of this episode to give you all some background to the topic we will be discussing. I first came across the story of my guest, Tommy Quick, a couple of months ago when I saw a news article talking about his 4 Points Australia ride, which he's currently undertaking. But what makes Tommy's story unique is his motivation to create this ride and his personal connections to the event. At the age of 12, Tommy suffered from a stroke, which is currently a condition that many people would associate with adults at a later stage in life. While paediatric stroke is not common, last year in Australia it was estimated that there were 600 children who suffered from one. So, what is stroke? Stroke occurs when a blood vessel supplying blood to the brain either suddenly becomes blocked or ruptured and begins to bleed. Either may result in part of the brain dying, leading to impairment that can affect a range of activities such as speaking, thinking, movement and communication. In Tommy's case, the impact the stroke had on him was severe. He was in an induced coma for 5.5 weeks, and when he woke up, he was unable to speak, move, or even hold his own head up. Many years of rehabilitation later, and through a passion for sport, Tommy regained his mobility and reclaimed his life. During this episode, Tommy shares that the part of the brain which is related to speech was the one most impacted from his stroke. I encourage you then to take the time to listen to this episode free of interruptions. I personally found Tommy's story so unique and inspiring. Many times during this edit, I actually paused to just consider how he has faced the adversity in his life head on and continues to live it in such an empowering way. I have also included a transcription of this episode in the show notes as well. Lastly, if going through the rehabilitation involved with having suffered from a young stroke wasn't enough, Tommy has also had to endure another kind of trauma. While he was partway through the 4 Points Australia ride, Tommy was hit by a motor vehicle. I'm thankful to say that after going through a significant period of rehabilitation, he is now back on his trike and has restarted this ride. But I would like to include a trigger warning here as we do discuss this accident during the episode. Okay, now let's get on to the show. Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's Seek Travel Ride podcast, Tommy Quick. In 2006, Tommy woke up in his sleep with what felt like a raging headache. Minutes later, he would be unconscious. He'd suffered a stroke, but Tommy was just 12 years old. Fast forward to today, and Tommy is currently midway through a monumental ride called 4 Points Australia, where he is fundraising to raise awareness for social inclusion and young stroke. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bella. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I am super excited to be speaking with you today, Tommy. I think not just myself, but our listeners are going to draw a lot of inspiration from your story.
I'm looking forward to it.
Tommy, what I like to do with all my guests is open with the same question, and that is, can you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
That was when I was younger than 6, I reckon. I would have been 4. I remember green, bright green bike. Then I remembered I got another bike when I was on my training wheels, but I can't remember what colour that was. So
Remember what it felt like going on those first bike rides?
I remember being scared about taking the training wheels off. That was so scary.
But then that realisation when you actually don't fall over too and you can keep going, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, freedom.
I love it. And I think for a select few of us, we keep that sensation with us, and that's what drives us when we keep riding bikes as adults as well.
Yeah.
Tommy, a big part of you and your story comes in at quite a young age. And I mentioned there in the introduction that the age of 12, you woke up feeling sick, a really bad headache, and suffered a stroke. For a lot of people, hearing that somebody at that young an age suffered a stroke would be, what? I didn't realise stroke could happen to people of that age. Can you go into what it was like for you?
So I woke up, I went into my parents' bedroom after about 5 minutes of laying there just thinking, my head's getting sore and sore. And then from there it just escalated. My mum went and got me some Disprin. I asked for one or two. It escalated so rapidly. 5 minutes later I was unconscious and woke up 5 weeks, 2 days later from an induced coma because the amount of swelling on my brain was pretty dramatic. They said that they had to remove about the size of a golf ball out of my brain. It was pretty full on.
You spent 5 weeks in an induced coma in hospital. I'm imagining like your last memory was a raging headache, and 5 weeks later you're in hospital. You wouldn't have any comprehension of the time that's passed between that headache to waking up. And then hearing the news of what's happened, I can only imagine as a 12-year-old that's really confusing for you and unsettling as well.
So when I woke up, I tried to speak. No words came out. I tried to move. Literally couldn't move. Tried to move my legs, couldn't move. Tried to lift my head up, couldn't even do that. And so that led to pretty much an instantaneous panic attack. Couldn't tell you word for word, but I'm pretty sure my parents rushed in, the nurses rushed in. They calmed me down, and it took a long time. Essentially, it took several years to even comprehend what happened, to understand what had happened. Everything takes time.
And not just comprehending what happened, but retraining your body to be able to speak, to be able to stand up, to be able to walk. I imagine that rehab was really extensive and intensive.
Now, I'm certainly more focused on my training, on my rehab, but back then, because I couldn't understand what happened, I was very negative, and then because of that, I was very not willing to make the most out of myself because I just didn't understand. There's one time that really sticks out to me was, so I was walking in the corridor, I had physio either side of me, and I must have fallen or tripped, and the physio caught me, but I just literally went to a dead weight and just sat down and refused to do anything because again it just comes back to that understanding and why did it happen to me essentially.
So, Tommy, how long a period of time did it take from waking up, not being able to move, not being able to speak, to finally being able to talk and to walk as well?
Well, do you follow the footy at all?
Oh, yeah, and actually, for our listeners who don't know what footy is, footy is an Australian term for football. But I'm thinking, Tommy, are you talking about Aussie rules football or rugby league or rugby union?
Australian rules football.
So the AFL.
So Aaron Davey and Daniel Rose came in and saw me in the hospital when I was 8 weeks post surgery. So very early on, I couldn't speak, but I was really excited. As any 12-year-old meeting a national player. And so after that encounter, I spent 3 days trying to tell my parents that I wanted to watch all the Melbourne Grand Finals again. Yeah, so from that, because my parents couldn't comprehend because I was giving gestures, I was playing with the TV, I was drew a DVD from the frustration. My first word that I learned to say was no, because kept saying no, not that, no, not that, and that's how I began to say things and very slurred speech and stuff. And apparently my speech had been the most affected part of my brain.
It's really hard for me to put myself in those shoes of just all of a sudden, it's almost like you're locked in. You can't get the message out that you're trying, and I imagine it would be frustrating.
Yeah, I can't even remember not being able to speak that long ago. And when you don't have something, you really come to terms with realizing just how important it was.
So speaking's one thing, but then obviously movement as well. Like, you woke up, you couldn't, raise your arm, you couldn't move. You're obviously moving now from that period of hopelessness, falling on the floor with the physio down the corridor, to being able to get around and walk. I imagine that was a long process as well.
Yeah. Probably the first thing that gave me any motivation was sport, to be honest. I remember in year 7, because I went back to school, and after class, we decided to play table tennis. And I fell in love with that. It was really my main source of motivation to want to get somewhere with life. Essentially, I wanted to walk again because I needed prompts, I needed things to do. But when I found them, that was the main driver.
Yeah, I can imagine. And something that you're motivated to do and that you enjoy doing and look forward to doing. I could imagine that all of a sudden you've transformed from feeling hopeless about your situation to having that goal and being goal driven and motivated to participate in life.
Yeah.
I looked through when I was reading a lot about your backstory there, Tommy, and you are participating in life, and you've taken on a lot of things that would floor a lot of fully able people, regardless of whether they've suffered any sort of health effects at all. In fact, something that I saw that you'd completed was the Kokoda track. And for those of my listeners who've never heard of the Kokoda track, it's in Papua New Guinea in the Pacific. It was an area of, horrific scenes during World War II for soldiers in that area, and it is deemed as, one of the hardest hiking trails out there. I think I'd be fair to say. But Tommy, come from this background of not being able to move, lying frozen, not being able to communicate even in a hospital bed at such a young age. But then years later, the Kokoda track is something that started motivating you.
Yeah, it was I had to do it, but it's not a race, it's just getting the job done. So I did it over 12 days. I went with my dad, my uncle, his best mate in one group, and we went 4 days ahead of another group, and they were actually the people who got me interested in wanting to do it. And yeah, it was a really good experience. I was walking 8 to 12 hours a day, literally up or down. It was pretty fun. So it's 80 kilometers on the flat, but if you count the mountains and stuff, it's 96 k's.
An extra 16 kilometres of vertical up and down, and really steep terrain. Like the conditions there, that I've not done it, but I've heard about it. I know people who've done it, and I've seen footage of this track, and it looks like jungle scenes almost, really slippery and muddy and steep.
That's in the good days of today. Think about veterans,
the soldiers, yeah,
who had to go through that day in, day out. I remember one thing in particular. So I got a porter, my dad got a porter, so you can get porters, and they were incredible. But I needed both of them to have a person inside of me to use them as stability. And there was a lot of hype around the other porters, and they were talking openly about me facing the wall. So the wall was literally a wall where it's the steepest part of the climb. It's literally vertical, and you've got to go zigzags up it. You've got tree roots, and it's like a sheer face. And they were talking about from day one. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. You could not see the top, but you could guess how far up you had to go, which was like probably 200 meters at most of this sheer face. And I actually smashed it, like absolutely, like ran amok with it. I was so proud of myself. I felt so accomplished that it didn't really set in till about like an hour later. And then when we got to Brigade Hill, I had a cry, as everyone does. And like, but the porters were amazed to see that I'd done the walk, but it was a whole experience just that day.
I could imagine like the sense of achievement you had after being able to, like you said, not just complete it, but absolutely crush that really difficult terrain that would be troublesome for many trying to complete the Konkota track. And you're there just showing how much ability you have. I think that's fantastic. And really driving the point home that you motivated for a goal, if you stick to it and have that sense of drive towards it, seeing what you can achieve and what's possible. I think that's fantastic. I guess, Tommy, then it's a good opportunity to talk about the 4 Points Australia ride. Can you introduce that ride to our listeners and give them a few details about what it exactly entails and what it is?
So the 4 Points was created over a simple cup of coffee. It was a crazy idea that Mum to do it. So what it originally was riding all the way around to the four most extreme points of mainland Australia. So it was all in all 9,000 k's, starting the westernmost point, Steep Point, the westernmost point on the continent, and then travelling down to the Nullarbor. And if you don't know what the Nullarbor is,
A long stretch, isn't it?
1,500 k's of absolutely nothing, apart from roadhouses and trucks.
A lot of open space and a lot of wind. I wonder whether you had headwind or tailwind on that stretch, or all wind, side wind.
Most of it was crosswind.
Yeah, I think for our listeners who don't know about the Nullarbor and the Nullarbor Plain in Australia, it's right. It traverses Australia west to east. It's very, very long stretch, but also quite a remote part of Australia as well. So not only is it challenging from a location point of view and you know the winds as well from a riding and physical challenge point of view, but it also takes quite a lot of preparation and planning because of the isolation. And what I mean by that is it's vast distances between services. Those services are normally provided at what we call roadhouses or road stations, because it is one of the main trucking routes for transportation of cargo across Australia as well. So we have these amazing big roadhouses, road stations, which are designed for long distance travellers. But when you're travelling on human powered bikes or a trike in your example here, Tommy, those distances provide an incredible challenge to cycle.
Yeah, certainly not easy. Longest day was 117 k's. That took like 6.5 hours. But I did have a tailwind on that day, so.
You've got to have a tailwind at some stage during this ride. Keep talking our listeners through. We've talked about the western point. You're travelling across the Nullarbor. What's the rest of your route?
Across the Nullarbor, down like outside of Adelaide, down to Wilson's Prom, then going up to Cape Byron Bay, and then heading up to Cape York.
Cape York Peninsula. So you're tackling the western point. What's the western point called again?
Steep Point.
So Steep Point to Wilson's Promontory, which is the most southern point there on the mainland. And then Cape Byron, around Byron Bay, which is the most eastern point of Australia. And then Cape York on the Cape York Peninsula at the very far northern point. So that north, south, east and west. Wow. And you mentioned there, Tommy, over 9,000 kilometres?
Yeah, it will be. Originally, it was about 8,800, but now it will be, yeah, it'll be over 9,000 k's. And like with COVID was a whole deal. Like had to start on the SA-WA border. Then we rode down through to Lucky Bay or Cow, South Australian thing. Then we shot back up through and changed states because we had to get a visa to pass into WA. From there we went up to Steve Point. We essentially joined the dots, but it was a whole ordeal. Like it literally expanded 3.5 months to 5 months.
I imagine the logistics actually for this whole ride has been a constant challenge, and you're probably constantly having to change on the route as you go along as well for various reasons. But yeah, the COVID restrictions in Australia, because they changed from state to state as well. So being able to navigate your way through all of those to being able to continue and travel on your ride would have been an extra logistical nightmare to have to handle, for sure.
Tell me about it.
Tommy, what was it like when you actually set off on day one? Having prepped for this ride, having to figure out all of this stuff, what was it like actually just doing the ride in itself?
Well, due to COVID, it was good to be able to do something because, we just got out of Victoria in time before the lockdown started, and that lockdown was brutal for my friends, who were back in Melbourne. So it was good to be out there riding, but it sucked to be riding by myself. Like my dad joined in a couple of days here and then, but he was normally doing his role as being the driver or navigator or whatever was needed to be done. It was a good feeling to start. Yeah, like the middle ground, like getting up, waking up. We weren't early risers. So we'd start like 9, 10 o'clock because either way I was going to be riding in the heat of the day. Might as well get some good sleep. And yeah, it was like that repetitive cycle of getting up, doing all those necessary things, jump on the track, repeating the process by myself. That was the brutal part. It was a lot of solitude. Yeah, it's going to be brutal again. That's where the mental toughness comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Tommy, if anyone's had some good training in mental toughness, going through what you did from that age of 12, you've had so many things which you've sort of put in the mental toughness bank, so many deposits made that you can start taking withdrawals on this ride. Some people love that solitude that they get when they're riding on their own, but some people aren't necessarily motivated at being on their own on their bike. So I can imagine for yourself, hours and hours, day after day of alone time, you probably go through the highs and low points there a few times, no doubt.
Yeah, like I would try and listen to a podcast or listen to music or just kind of, I would take myself away from it or be present or think about things I needed to do on social media or think about talks I was going to deliver, and there was always something my mind could churn over. A lot of time, because I ride slower, I'm not going to win any medals for races. I needed that companionship essentially because I didn't have it. It was very hard. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to raise awareness for young stroke, but also get joiners along the way. So people are actually coming out to promote inclusion.
And so promoting people to find you on your website, find you on the map, see where you're riding and join you for a few kilometres, a few hours or sections of the ride each day. I think that's a great idea. Power of your own little mini peloton encouraging you and joining you for that experience.
Wind shelters.
Wind shelters. Oh, the true motivation comes out now. you want a wheel to follow. That's great. With the early part of the ride there, Tommy, and notwithstanding those long days on your own, could you pick up just a highlight that you had on the ride that, a moment where you just not stopped you in your tracks, but something that you reflect on now and just makes you smile?
Probably one that stand out to me like instantaneously was second or third day, and like I just made it in time to get into the next destination. The sun was setting. Yeah, it was just like the sunset was incredible. That was a pretty good feeling. Like, and then probably another highlight was like steep point. So steep point, right? So you've got Gerald turn, then you go up about 200 k's. You've got to turn off, and you start heading towards Monkey Mire. Monkey Mile is actually a national park. But then you've got to go through like three like U's, letter U, to get out to Steep Point. From where Monkey Mile sits, it's about 183 k's out to Steep Point, and you've got about 30 meters from the turnoff on to bitumen. Then it's gravel, so it's 153 k's. And then you've got about 110 k's of gravel. And then you got deep sand, like literally deep sand. Now, I managed to do like 15 k's of that soft sand, but I couldn't, like, my tires weren't, like,
sinking in.
yeah, we just really packed up shop and started somewhere else and made up for that like 20, 30 Ks. But the accomplishment to get from there, from sand to gravel to bitumen and get on the bitumen, like if you check out like the real first point on my YouTube channel, like you actually literally see me going down and kissing the bitumen.
Yeah, I can imagine that feeling. I like steep, soft sand to cycle through. Yeah, not ideal. Not ideal. Though I could imagine you just joyous. Like you would feel instantaneous speed hitting the asphalt. and it'd be like a downhill, wouldn't it? Like it's just like feels so vastly different and effortless. I could only imagine.
Yeah.
Reaching that, like you said, the real first point, steep point, that first of the 4 points on your trip, that western point there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a high. I think, sadly, you're able to recount a real low for this ride as well, and it would be something that quite horrific and unexpected because notwithstanding the challenges you had just to get to this ride, start the ride, and the barriers that you had to endure, but unfortunately you were also, during this ride, hit by a car, weren't you?
Yeah, so it was the third day in the third segment. It was actually the day before November 16th. We'd had our first like joiner on the ride who come out for the day and chosen to ride with me, and that was awesome. And then the next day was only a 22k ride. 10k's were on the Stewart Highway. We were meant to have dinner at a friend's restaurant. It was all lined up. And yeah, like I was riding pretty stoked, pretty high on life because I was getting to Melbourne, and the guy just, all I heard was screech of the tires, and then he plowed into me. And like 5 seconds before I turned the GoPro on, so the GoPro, you can hear all the audio of that.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was pretty full on. But my parents later on told me that it veered out on the dual highway, veered out, tried to auto correct, but apparently his brakes locked, and he just plowed into me. And yeah, he was I found out later he was unlicensed and drug affected.
Changes the course of not just your ride, but your life as well. Like all of a sudden, you've spent so much of your life in rehabilitation, relearning how to speak again, relearning how to walk again, how to move independently again. You motivated and you're on this charity ride to raise awareness for social isolation and young stroke, and then all of a sudden the worst of the worst happens to you and you find yourself in hospital again. I mean, what was that like there, Tommy?
Well, there were a few factors, and there's been lows and highs. I'm not gonna lie, but it was more mechanical this time. So like you got neurological, you got mechanical. I essentially smashed my acetabulum, my pelvis on my right side. I fractured my sacrum. I had a hairline fracture in my femur. Surprisingly, I don't know how, but I had the fractures spinae of the thoracic 8, 9, and 10. They were fractured for some reason, but they weren't that bad. Yeah, there were a few factors. Like, one was like a day later, or a day or two later, Channel 9 came in and saw me, and they did a story about me. And literally without thinking, I said, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I was like, I'll be back. And that was kind of the motivation I needed to like essentially get back to where I was and finish off the ride. And yeah, but there's definitely been some low points. Yeah, not been an easy journey, but I walk so slow these days. Like before I had the car crash, I could run not very well, not very fast. I could run. Now, to be honest, very unlikely to ever run it again at this point, but you never know.
You're not willing to say never. You still want to be motivated to see what's possible, because I mean, Tommy, looking back on your life, I think you certainly probably proved a lot of people wrong for certain things as well. But it was interesting what you said there at the start was it was a different type of recovery because it was physical, not necessarily neurological stuff that you had to recover there. And imagine there would also be quite a lot of mental recovery involved in that too.
Yeah.
I don't want to put thoughts in your mind, but for me, I think that's such a traumatic incident. So this occurs halfway through a ride. You know, rehab aside, was there a point in your rehab where you just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm scared to do this?
I would say yes, but only fleeting moments and only because of particular reasons. Want to move on with my life in some aspects, relationships, work, other avenues, but like everyone feel like me especially, but everyone wants things instantaneously these days.
Frustrations of things not moving as quickly as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, I would say that. I get frustrated more, definitely. I really like spending time with people I truly care about. I want to spend time with my close friends more. Saying that, like, I'm still a very open person, but I'm very against Avas, and because seeing myself in the chair has made me realize that people you got a lot of talk to you like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and you've done a bachelor in nutrition.
Yeah, you're not stupid. It's not like you're not intelligent.
Yeah, exactly.
You're an adult. Exactly. You're an adult and a person that's quite bright. I guess people are dismissive of you because of that initial perception.
Yeah.
I can imagine it would be hard. Did you ever think of quitting the ride?
Fleeting moments. Yeah.
Yeah. So the accident happened, was it November 2021?
November 17th, 2021.
How long did it take before you could get back and restart the 4 Points Australia ride?
So I did barely any training, but I joined in the Great Big Bike Ride, which is hosted by a bicycle network. and I did the 4 days. And that would be the reason why I chose to go bicycle network was safety reasons, because it's very safe context. It's like you've got over 2,000 riders that block off practically most roads. And that was on the 26th of November. And then on the 4th of December, we rode from pretty much my house down to Wilson's Pond, which is about 280 k's. And yeah, we had riders who joined in with us. We had quite a few riders. We had one stage 5 riders, which was awesome.
That would have been mega. Reaching that southern point.
Yeah, it was
Point 2.
instantaneous pleasure. Like when I did Kokoda, it took me like 2 or 3 weeks to realize I'd done it. Whereas this was instantaneous accomplishment. It was such a great feeling, and that's really what kept me wanting to drive on and complete the ride. Like I wasn't certain at that stage. I didn't know if I was capable. There was so many factors, and like wanted to see if my heart was in it, and it was by the end of that.
There's been a common theme here, actually, Tommy, not just with this ride, but just with all your struggles that you've had to work through. And it's that presence of being motivated and having a goal, and how without the motivation or the goal, it can't happen. And I can see just how this has been a driving force for you as well. So I can see how it would have been important to you post that horrific accident to, in your mind, still believe and want to have this 4 Points Australia thing as your goal. Because if you're not motivated for your goal, it's not going to happen. So reaching Wilson's Promontory, immediately feeling that sense of achievement instantaneously, as you said, also then probably from what you were sharing made you realize, yes, this is still my goal and I'm still motivated to go on with it. That's awesome. It's really inspiring for me to hear that.
It's actually really funny, like when you said goals. I did Utah PE, and I was graded all the subjects except one subject. Do you reckon you could guess which subject I didn't like about PE?
Which one?
Setting goals, like
Oh, wow.
yeah. So things come back to bite on the bum, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. But look, you've turned it around. I wouldn't pick you as someone who doesn't set goals, and you're achieving them too. Tommy, a lot of the motivation that you've got for this 4 Points Australia ride is actually highlighting to many people just even that young stroke is a thing, and talking about young stroke and social inclusion. And you've factored that into the way that you've set your ride out by doing talks along the way. Can you talk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah. I'll pretty much talk to anyone who listens. I really would like to talk in schools, because I think schools are great because the information is retained much better. But also they can put perspective in reality for young kids or teenagers going through things. And like I've probably met 3 kids over the past 20, 30 talks I've done to schools and stuff, and 3 kids have had relations who had suffered strokes or grandparents or stuff.
Tommy, in terms of this ride, we talked before, like you do invite people to join you if they can and on your trip as well. So I will provide links to your website and your Instagram, and actually you also have a YouTube channel, which I've seen. So I'll provide links to them all for our listeners in our show notes so they can track track your progress, and for those who are in Australia and able to, maybe can actually find out when you might be riding close to them and join you on your ride as well.
Yeah.
I can tell you now, Tommy, I'm here in France. I can't join you on that ride, but I sure is certain going to be looking at your website periodically and actually seeing where you're up to. And I'll be sending some virtual encouragement your way and constant tailwinds too.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you and to learn about your story, and I'm so thankful that I'm able to share it with our listeners. 2 quick questions that I like to ask all my guests to finish up the show. The first one is, if you had a choice of riding on a constant climb or having to ride in a constant headwind, which one would you choose?
Probably constant climb.
A constant climb, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not a fan of the winds either.
Well, like, I would get the burn out of the constant climb, whereas, like, the wind, it just feels hard, and you're not making any progress, and you've got no satisfaction whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, it resonates with me. And the last one, I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but anyway, if you had the choice of spending 4 hours riding on your own or 4 hours riding with other people, which one would you choose?
I think you can answer that for me if you like.
I think you want company.
Yes, exactly. I need it.
Well, Tommy, it has been so great to chat with you today. Thank you once again, and I wish you an onward journey with no constant climbs and no headwinds either. And may many people join you along the way. Thank you for sharing your story with the Seek Travel Ride podcast.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on here. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Tommy. Well, I don't know about you, but I certainly found listening to Tommy recount his story there really impactful. Like I said at the start of the show, I found myself pausing a fair few times as I was editing back this audio interview, just taking stock of how far Tommy's come, coming back as a stroke survivor, certainly not a stroke victim. It was also really clear how sport was a massive motivator for Tommy. Meeting 2 AFL legends in his hospital room really gave him the drive to learn to talk again, then move and then walk. He is really kicking goals, to put it in footy terminology, and I'm really, really proud of what Tommy is achieving. I have included links in the show notes to Tommy's live tracking, so you can actually track his progress and see how far he has gone. I believe he has ticked over the 5,000 kilometre mark now, so he is past the halfway mark on this monumental 9,000 kilometre journey on the 4 Points Australia ride. And if you are in Australia and happen to be near Tommy's routes, I really, really encourage you to go onto his website, which I've provided a link for, and get in touch to see if you can link up with Tommy and join him for a pedal. If it's anything that I picked up from speaking with Tommy, it's that his vibrant personality certainly would love to have your company along for a few kilometres of this ride. So don't delay, get in touch with Tommy now. If you are enjoying the Seek Travel Ride podcast, please can I encourage you to go into your podcast player app and give the show a rating and review. It's really been so uplifting for me to get messages from you all during the weeks of these episodes that I've recorded and letting me know just how much you've enjoyed listening to the stories of my guests. Giving the show a rating and review just allows the show to be pushed out with those podcast algorithms to a wider audience. We are a global reach, and it's amazing to see how many countries and cities the podcast is currently being listened to. It really fills me with joy. And if you yourself have been on your own epic bicycle adventure, don't delay. Get in touch with me. Send me an email to the address podcast@seektravelride.com and talk to me about being interviewed as a guest for the show. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.